Have you ever wondered why so many project plans are severely underestimated and why so many of them go over time? Well, it's not rocket science. There's no surprises that should be there if you know what you're doing from a project planning perspective. But what exactly is wrong with your project plan and how can you make sure you have a realistic one? That's what I want to dive into here today. My name is Eric Kimberly. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation projects. And one of the biggest things we see in project plans is the fact that they aren't realistic to begin with. Most plans look something like this, but most in reality end up looking like this in terms of duration. That also applies to your budget as well. And the reason for this isn't a secret. It shouldn't be this way. If you go into the project planning process with your eyes wide open and you understand what all the variables are, this should never happen. You might have slight variances, but you should not have something that takes twice as long or 3 times as long as what you originally planned for. But yet, that's what happens with most digital transformation and technology projects. So what I want to do today is talk about what is it that leads us from an unrealistic plan to reality so that this actually becomes the green line that we plan for to ensure that we've included all the different components. Now, if you'd like to learn more about successful projects and what you need to do to be successful, you can learn from over 1,000 different digital transformation projects in recent years by reading our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. Now, the first reason, and arguably the most important reason, why so many plans end up looking like this in reality when in fact they were planned to be a lot shorter is decision making. More specifically, slow decision making. And it's not even just slow decision making, it's just slower decision making from what was planned for. You think about the ideal assumption scenario where a software vendor or a system implementer gives you a plan, they're assuming that you're going to have quick decisions. And that doesn't typically happen. These are major business decisions that you usually have to make, and more often than not, organizations take longer than what was planned for in the plan. And what's even worse is then the end client ends up getting blamed for the fact that things ran way over because they couldn't make immediate on-the-fly, on-the-spot decisions, which isn't a realistic expectation in any scenario, but especially the more complex, the more global, the more diversified you are, this phenomena is going to be even more true. So making sure that you factored in some assumptions around how long it's going to take you to make decisions, especially those major business decisions, that's something you've got to factor into your plan because that will inevitably push out your timeline and you want to go in with realistic expectations to begin. Now, in addition to decision making, another reason why so many project plans end up looking a lot different in reality in terms of duration is because of business process management and I'll call it general phase 0 implementation planning sorts of activities. When an organization has not spent time up front defining business processes, and it hasn't taken the time to get its governance in place and to get a framework and a team in place to prepare for the project, what happens is the plan starts before you're actually ready and before you have all the pieces in place. Inevitably, without the right plan, without the right resources being mobilized, without the right program governance in place, inevitably this is going to quickly turn into this. So making sure that you invest time and effort early on in phase 0 before this plan starts is going to ensure that you have a better chance of achieving this plan. And by going through this BPM and phase 0 process, you're going to know whether or not this is realistic or not because you've taken the time to validate the plan, to incorporate all the missing pieces of the plan into the plan so that now you have a realistic timeline, not an overly aggressively compressed timeline, which is not realistic to begin with. So one of the biggest takeaways from this is to ensure that you do a proper phase 0, including making major business decisions that you want to make, especially if you're a global organization or you're trying to standardize operations or change your business processes, change jobs, incorporate AI into people's jobs. Those are big decisions that take time, and the more you can spend time up front doing that, the more likely you are to accelerate the implementation of the actual technology. A third reason why so many project plans run way over the expected plan is because of testing. And I'm not just talking about software testing here, although that is part of it. Most software vendors are pretty good at testing their software, making sure that there's no technical bugs, but that's rarely the problem in the testing cycles. The major problem that we typically see in these testing cycles is the user acceptance or the conference room pilot testing. So those are more business-oriented testing to ensure that you've simulated your business in a digital twin sort of environment where you're testing out what these future state processes are going to be, and you're validating that the processes work. The software may work, but that doesn't mean the processes and the workflows for your business are going to work. So we need to make sure that we do both. We do the technical testing and the user acceptance testing. And the problem here is that most software vendors severely underestimate this, or they just assume technical testing and maybe one round, maybe 2 rounds at the most of really high-level user acceptance testing. But that's arguably the most important part of testing, and you want to spend several cycles going through that because each cycle will expose problems or potential showstoppers in your implementation, and you need time to fix those problems, whether it's revisiting your business process, revisiting the technology, fixing some data, managing the integration better, whatever it is, you're going to find problems. You need to make sure you have time via multiple iterations to capture all that, but most plans that are unrealistic don't include that, and that's why we need to add a dose of reality to ensure we've got proper testing in our plan. Another reason why so many project plans run way over the initial stated plan is because of a lack of focus on training or a lack of time committed to training. Now, typically software vendors are going to incorporate a train the trainer work stream within their plan. That's this plan right here. But training the trainer is a lot different than the trainers going out and training hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees that are going to be severely affected by this project and by the changes. So we need to make sure that we've got multiple rounds of training, that we facilitated the entire training process, and it's going to take a lot longer to train your employees than it's going to take to train the trainers. But the software vendor's project plan typically has train the trainer. They have not incorporated the mass training for employees. So in order to have a realistic plan and a complete plan, we need to make sure that if we're going to reflect reality in a realistic way, that we have the full training captured in the overall plan and strategy. Another reason why so many plans start off looking like this in the initial planning phase, but then end up looking like this in reality is because of data management. Oftentimes there is a very small one line item bullet footnote in your statement of work with your software vendor that says they're going to migrate the data, but they're not going to clean it up. They're not going to map it. They're not going to validate it. They're going to take the data you give them and they're going to put it in the new system. Well, that's not nearly good enough. That's just barely scraping the tip of the iceberg. We need to look at the entire data set, clean it up, validate it, make sure the mapping is correct. We might need to change our entire data structure. Those are all big deals. You think about your chart of accounts. You might have multiple charts of accounts you need to clean up. You might have a new part numbering nomenclature you're going to need to use for the new system. You might have duplicate vendors and customers in your system that you want to clean up and consolidate so that you can actually get better visibility into the operations. Those are all things that take a lot of time, and they typically are not captured in this plan, but yet you're on the hook for them. They're assuming you're going to do it, and they're going to assume you're going to do it as fast as they can roll out technology, but that's rarely the case. Data management is typically what pushes these projects out. So again, we need to have an agnostic view of the program to make sure that we've incorporated data management adequately in our overall plan. Another reason why so many plans start off looking like this, but then they end up looking like this, is because of change management. This is the people side of things, the organizational change, human side of the overall transformation, arguably the most important part of the entire project. However, most software vendors don't do this stuff. Most plans from software vendors and system integrators only include really, really light change management, like basic training, basic communications, but you're on the hook for ensuring that you've defined what your future state's going to look like. You're on the hook for defining what your people's jobs are going to look like. You're on the hook to figure out how people are going to use AI in the new environment or how to make their processes more efficient. That all takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of time to get people on board with the changes to fully understand the changes, not just the technology, but the changes to their jobs, the changes to their processes, the changes to the workflows, all that stuff. So we need a complete change management program if we want to have a realistic plan, and this plan that you typically get from a software vendor is nowhere close to addressing the change management needs. which is why that's something we provide to our clients, is helping them define what the change strategy is and incorporating that into their overall plan. And by the way, if you'd like to learn more about change management and how you can incorporate that into your overall plan and strategy, be sure to read our guide to change management. You can find that right here, scan the QR code here, or go to the links below. Now, one last reason why so many projects start off looking like this, but they end up looking like this in reality, is because they haven't incorporated the time to stabilize the environment and to optimize the environment before moving into the next phase of the project. Most projects are not single phase, big bang implementations unless you're a smaller organization, but for any mid-size or larger organization, you're probably going to have a phased rollout. And in that phased rollout, you're going to deploy different technologies in different places at different times. And what these underestimated plans typically do is they assume that you're going to go live in one location, maybe at the most you'll have 30 days of hypercare support, and then you're going to move on to the next one. You're going to move on to the next phase. But what we find is it typically takes months to really fine-tune and optimize what you can do to increase the value of your project, but also to take those lessons and apply those to the next phases of the project. If we rush through hypercare, all we're doing is just stabilizing it to where we can actually just operate as a business. We're not looking yet at how we maximize ROI, how we can learn from that to make the next phase of our project better, but yet the project plans most vendors provide is very compressed and doesn't leave enough time for that. So if we want to be truly successful in our project, we'll include some additional stabilization, especially in the early phases of the project. That first pilot location is probably going to be a bit rocky compared to the ones later in the project. So why not take the time to get it right, fine-tune, optimize, learn, and then apply those lessons to the next phase so that eventually it becomes a bit more cookie cutter, a bit more predictable and consistent throughout the entire implementation. So make sure you include stabilization as well. And if you'd like to learn more about how to make your project successful, you can learn from 1,000 other projects that have been through the same journey as you. You can read those 20 main lessons that we learned from those 1,000 clients that we've helped with. You can read the ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations right here with this QR code, or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.